They are announcing the 49ers pick at the podium right now. I have my thing on mute, so I can't. First of all, who is that? I can't see who it is.
Julian
Okay,
Peterson.
the pick is, it is. Alfred Collins is the pick. Niners go in the trenches again. The defensive tackle from Texas. Javi, I saw you raise your hands in the air a second ago. Were you celebrating this pick?
Yes, I'm celebrating this pick because he and a couple other Texas players were at my store recently buying cars. So, yes, I'm in on this kid, Alfred Collins. He's from Bastrop, Texas, which is from my house, probably 45 minutes south. 6'6", 332, 34-inch arms, 10-inch hands. This guy's an absolute monster. He fits everything the Niners are trying to do with, two gapping the offensive line. I love it. You need a big body defensive tackle. They haven't had a guy, with that kind of weight in the inside since DJ Jones, but DJ Jones was much shorter, obviously. So I'm in on this. The bigger the guy, the better. You need to get big guys up front, especially with what's happening in the league right now with these bigger offensive linemen. The running game is kind of making a resurgence. You need run stuffers, and the Niners are making a clear effort here to stop the run. They believe in their secondary clearly with, guys like Mustafa, Lenore, and Green. So they're here to stop the run, and when they have to go after the passer, they're going to get after the passer. I'm in on this pick. I was down on any defensive tackle, any edge rusher, whatever you need to do to bolster this entire defensive line. That's how we've won in the past. That's always how we've won. The Niners have been a defensive team. Just as much as they've been an offensive team. I think D'Amico Ryan said that a couple of years ago when he became the defensive coordinator. Like, everyone recognized the Niners as this offensive juggernaut, but when they've won Super Bowls, they've been defensive powerhouses as well. So get back to your roots. You hit it with Michael Williams. This is another, to me, if we're putting in baseball terms, this is a double in the second round as Alfred Collins. That's a double, and you'll take doubles all day in the NFL draft. I'm down on this pick. That's awesome that they did this. Now, what do they do at 75 and 100? We'll see how that goes, but I'm in on Collins all the way. Love it.
Heinz says Javi bought them Toyotas before Brock. Did he buy a car before he came in?
Yeah, I can't disclose what they bought, but yeah, they bought something.
From you?
Yeah, I took care of the pricing. I'm the boss. I don't have to sell it. I don't have to sell anything.
Hey, what do you think about the pick of Alfred Collins?
Yeah, I think the pushback on Darius Alexander was he going to be big enough to occupy those blocks, be a space eater. And I think you don't have those concerns with Collins. Again, it all depends on what you're looking for. In wide nine, you need those guys in the middle to hold up blocks so those one-on-one edge opportunities show up. So much about the wide nine is speculated on, keeping the edge, all that stuff. You do that with Michael, but now you get your space eater and you get a guy who is not just going to hold up blocks, who's actually going to be able to impact the run, in the backfield and, develop as a pass rusher as well too. You had to know defensive tackle was going, but I do think the pushback on Darius Alexander was just his size and can he be that type of force? So, like Javi said, DJ Jones, that's kind of where you are. And the 49ers have been looking for that every down defensive tackle since Buckner and Armstead have left. Perhaps they have found that in Collins, and that would be a great thing. And again, this feels like they turned the keys right over to Robert Saleh in this draft. They said, hey, listen, we need you back so bad, dude. We have pick 11 and pick 43. Do what you want and do whatever you want, and we'll shut up and get out of the way. And Robert Saleh said, I need Michael and I need Collins. And I don't blame them because they do need to get better eventually and restock this roster, but they need to be better tomorrow or when week one comes around and being a better run defense team. And that's already started.
SF Data 49ers, for what it's worth, says Collins was the 43rd pick. He was taken 20 spots higher than his consensus big board ranking at 63. I was just trying to check. He was 70. No, I'm sorry. He was 68 on the Dane Brugler big board. I don't know that means anything. I'm just trying to present, somewhat of both sides on this thing. I don't know anything about Alfred Collins, to be totally honest with you, but I'm glad both of you are happy. He's a huge dude, and I always say with defensive tackle, it'd be great if you could rush the passer and do all that stuff. But the bare minimum, just like a car, right? Javi, we're talking about cars. The bare minimum I need from my car is to get me from point A to point B safely. With the defensive tackle, I just want a dude that's going to hold his ground. If you do nothing else, I'll be satisfied with your play. And it certainly helps to hold your ground when you're Alfred Collins and you're 6'6", 332 pounds.
Yeah, and he gives him positional versatility, right? He doesn't necessarily have to play the nose tackle all the time, too. He can probably play a little 3 technique, little 5 technique too for this defense, right? So he gives them a little bit more. He did some of that in Texas. I know I live in the area. I live pretty close to Austin. So Texas had a hell of a year, right? Texas had a really strong recruiting class the last couple of years. So and I think the other part is, I'm just thinking about it just as we're going about this, these are blue chip guys. These are blue chip colleges, Texas and Georgia, right? You're going for these big name schools with big prospects who are used to playing in big time games, have experience in big bowl games and things like that. The Niners are expecting to be in the playoffs. These guys, they want guys who have experience in big games, who know how to handle things, who come from bigger programs, who can handle, adversity, being coached hard, going, so on and so forth. And they're coming from strong coaching staffs, right? You got Kirby Smart, you got Sark at Texas. That's the way to go. Sometimes drafting is simple. Take good players from good teams. It's really not that hard. And sometimes it's okay to draft for need. Like I said, the last couple of years, Niners are kind of just thinking they can play with this luxury thing. Why not just draft the best player you could possibly get and follow the model of the Eagles or the Chiefs or teams like that who are consistently winning ball games? So getting a guy like Collins and Michael Williams, that's strong. Now you've set yourself up to kind of where the draft can fall to you. And if you need to go take maybe a luxury pick, a wide receiver at 75, you can do that. You can go take a tight end at 75 if you need to do that. Or if you want to just continue this trench buildup, then maybe you go take, a guy, a little bit smaller, more of a speed rusher to kind of complement Nick Bosa and Michael Williams in this turbo package. I think that's probably going to come back under Robert Saleh, where you get a little smaller size guy, get yourself some speed, and now you're doing a little bit more combinations with Bosa, Michael Williams, Yetur Gross-Mano, and maybe the rookie who's a little bit lighter in the pass rush. So that's just kind of how I'm looking at this defense as this is going right now. So I'm excited, bro. That's 2 picks. The last 2 years, obviously, I didn't care for the Pearsall pick, but I was in on the Ronaldo Green pick. So 3 of the 4, I'm in. I like what they're doing. It's good.
Jay, do you think Alfred Collins is a plug and play starter?
Yep. And you got yourself 2 day 1 starters, and that's all you can ask for at this point. And again, in this scheme, what's needed? You're going to keep the wide 9, get you a big body defensive tackle, get you an edge rusher that can rush the passer, and you can move around a little bit. The Michael Williams thing, it's like Eric Armstead. He's just not as heavy, so he can't play defensive tackle like Eric Armstead with his hand in the dirt, but you can move him around and use him differently on stunts, bring him to the middle, move him around because he's that fast, he's that athletic. It's flexibility. And I think when we hear John Lynch say that Robert Saleh's scheme is evolving, it's based on these ideas, because when he was the 49ers defensive coordinator in 2019, it was rush forward and everybody drop. Now we have different ways that we're going to create pressure with different skill sets and different players and line them up differently and give you guys fits. That is all exciting. 2 starters, 11 and 43. You got to love it.
At the biggest area of need for the 49ers, clearly defensive line. Look, we obviously don't know how these players are going to turn out, but damn, they understand the assignment. And sometimes you wondered with the 49ers, like, do they not see what we see? Well, they clearly do, because they have addressed the defensive line twice so far in 2 opportunities. Real quick, I just want to sneak this super chat in because he's been waiting. Perfect Blackness Senior, thank you, says, you're not convincing me that Tyler effing Shuck is better than Shador Sanders. Get the bleep out of here. Shador this is like precipitous now. This is like longer than the Aaron Rodgers fall now. I mean, who knows when the hell he's going to go. Even the Cowboys had a pick. They didn't take him. The Colts had a pick. They didn't take him. He's going to be waiting there forever.
Yeah, I think he's gonna fall to the 3rd round. I think to me he looked. I was never really big on Sanders, not for any reason other than not for anything like with his dad or anything like that. Players are players. Just watch them how they play. You played in the Big 12, which is a crappy conference. Your team didn't win anything major while you were there. Yes, the program changed around, but Travis Hunter had a lot more to do with that than anything else. That's kind of my opinion on it. To me, he feels like a guy that's going to be, if he does start long term, he's going to have the career of like, what's the guy's name from the Jags a couple of years ago? Minshew. To me, he feels like a Gardner Minshew type of player long term. That's just kind of what I see. I'm open to being wrong. He could be Russell Wilson for all we know, but I'm not super high on Sanders, and I think the league tells you. The league will humble you, and the league will tell you what they think of you based on the draft. Now they're always wrong. They're wrong a lot of times, but most of the time they don't necessarily miss on that kind of stuff. Yeah, this hat is fire. I got this off of Shop, that app, and I've randomly found it was sold out for months, and I finally found it like a year ago. So
There you go.
I think I wear it like once or twice. But just real quick, Rob.
Hold on, Jay's got to bounce real quick, so I want to give you the last word, Jay.
Yeah, the Shedeur Sanders thing, I don't care. That's not my business. So who cares where he goes? We're not in the business of looking for a quarterback for once, so I don't really care. But yes, look, the first 2 picks out of this world right now in terms of what you need, and in terms of hitting on absolute needs. If we're going 11 for 11, we're 2 for 2 already, and that's a pretty good start. So I don't know how realistic that is, but yeah. 2 for 2 is not a bad start at all. And Heineman says Jay leaving before they take 3rd round kicker. Yeah, because I'll crash out and I will literally destroy things in my house. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for hopping in. We appreciate it. I know you got other things to do tonight, but thanks for everything yesterday and today, man. Appreciate it.
You got it. Javi, hit me a little bit later, bro.
Yes, sir.
There you go. Jason Aponte. Always appreciate one half of the Bully Ball podcasts. I saw an interesting tweet while you guys were talking from Jeff Deeney of Pro Football Focus. Let me throw it up on the screen here real quick. He said Alfred Collins had an 87.2 overall grade last year at Texas, including 85 against the run, 21 run stops. Collins had just 2 missed tackles all season, Javi. Pump that into my freaking veins. I got so sick and tired of watching teams run all over the Niners last year.
Yeah, I mean, they were the 29th ranked rush defense. Just looking at Collins' numbers just real quick, that's what I was going to say. Like 2020, he played 10 games. 2021, he played 12 games. 2022, he played 12 games. 2023, he played 14 games. 2024, he played 16 games. So there's a track record here. This guy is going to play a lot of games. He doesn't have an injury history. Last year, 55 tackles, 5.5 tackles for loss, 1 sack, 7 pass breakups, a forced fumble, and a block kick. Like, that is production from a defensive tackle who's probably going to see the field, 55 to 60% of the time as your starter, in your base package. He's going to see the field, and he's going to be in there, on your 3rd down, short and 3rd and shorts. He's going to be there on your 1st and 2nd downs. He's going to get a lot of play time, and you like that. I mean, he's solid. 2nd team All-American last year. On a solid Texas team who played against one of the best offensive lines in football. He had to practice against UT's offensive line. So, I'm all in on this pick. I like what I see. I'm happy that they did it. The Niners are really digging in on this stopping the run philosophy, and that's how they've been. Stop the run, you get to have fun. That's the saying, right? That was what it was. Stop the run, you get to have fun. 3rd down. Now you get these teams into 3rd and 6s, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8 situations because the run game isn't working for those offenses. Then you go let Michael Williams do his thing, and Nick Bosa on the other side. You create what you're trying to recreate the 2019 defense. You're trying to recreate the 2023 Niner defense. That's what they're trying to do here. Obviously, there still needs some work to be done on the defensive line, so I fully expect them to take another defensive end or defensive tackle, with 75 or 100. But I like where they're going here, man. It looks good.
It feels like now, I always tell my kids, if you handle your responsibilities, I don't care what you do after that. If you do your homework, I don't care if you play video games for 2 hours after that. You did your homework. You handled your business. And with these first 2 picks, it feels like the Niners have handled their business a little bit. You've addressed the defensive line. If you want to take another defensive lineman, I think that would be fine. They definitely still need it, but you don't have to take defensive line now with this next pick. I feel like you can let the board come to you a little bit and give yourself a little freedom in case Kyle does want to take a shiny new toy. He wants to. He's got his eye on him.
Absolutely. I mean, I was kind of glad that the running backs are kind of falling off right away, so he doesn't get crazy. But that's ideal here. I hope he wasn't thinking of doing something stupid, which they have to protect him from himself sometimes.
Yes, I think that is exactly the right phrase. Let's throw up the beast, the Dane Brugler draft guide, talking about Alfred Collins. As a coordinated big man, Collins plays with natural power and does a great job as a 2-gapper, stacking, peaking, and grounding ball carriers between the tackles. His hands are more heavy than disciplined, and he struggles to root himself versus doubles because of his tall pads. Overall, Collins is still learning how to maximize his size and talent, but he took a sizable jump this past season and shows the physical traits to be a disruptive force, especially against the run. He'll provide immediate depth as a rookie, and his snap count should increase with experience. This is a little bit of a bet by the Niners, Javi, on Robert Saleh and Chris Kasarik as well, right? They're saying, hey, we're taking these guys, and we think we've got the coaches to squeeze the most juice out of that orange.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of in that Dave Ruler's assessment, I saw that too. He kind of gets a little too high, but we've heard that a lot with these taller guys, right? Eric Armstead,
Yes.
DeForest Buckner, that wasn't a concern. Javon Kinlaw, that was a concern. These taller guys, they want to get upright and they get pushed around a little bit in the run game and even in the pass game. So that stuff can be developed. That stuff can be taught. As we saw with Eric Armstead, it got better over time. With Kinlaw, it got better over time. So that stuff can be taught. That's something that will get him going later on in his career. I don't fully expect him to be a finished product. He's not a finished product. These guys are young, right? He's only 22 years old, I think it was. And that stuff, again, that can be developed. We've seen it. And we know that if anything, the Niners can at least teach that. Stay low, get under your offensive lineman's pads and drive them, into their own backfield. So that can be developed. The doubles because of his tall pads and then maximizing his size. That's something he's got to get used to, right? He's playing against, at the time when Texas was in the Big 12, he had smaller offensive lines as opposed to these big ones in the SEC. So he had to get used to that. Obviously, he did that in the SEC, playing against Georgia, playing against Alabama, playing against these bigger teams. I think he'll be fine. I think this is a really good piece. Everything that I know about him down here at UT, he's a solid kid too. That's the other part. So I think they hit a double on this one, man. I really, really like this.
Just checking out the Dieter and Hutch draft guide about Alfred Collins. Says upside is Chris Jones. Love hearing that. Downside is inconsistent, strength-reliant player who gets displaced at times in the run game because of inconsistent pad level and technique, gets too tall in pass sets and never fully realizes his potential. When you're 6'5", that type of thing happens. But I always look at draft picks like this as well, Javi. How correctable are your flaws? Playing with a pad level that's too high, I feel like that's a fixable thing. It's going to take a little time, but I feel like you can address it. Not one of these, mythical, unfixable things that can never get any better. So if that's your biggest flaw, I'll take that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, we had the same concerns about Eric Armstead when he came in the league. He gets too high. He get pushed off doubles. And we saw that early on, obviously, with the Chip Kelly years and things like that. But once you get the right defensive coordinator in, things happen. Things change. Who's in now? Who's picked?
Cardinals just took Will Johnson. The Cardinals are having a bit of a draft. Walter Nolan and Will Johnson. I mean, if you're talking upside, right? If those guys hit, those are two big additions to that defense that the Niners are going to have to see twice a year.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think Nolan's going to be a hit. Will Johnson, again, like I said, that knee is concerning, but they can take that chance, right? They have some depth at corner where this kid can just kind of, work his way into the roster, work his way, into the starting lineup, or even just as a situational guy, maybe just start special teams, just kind of do what he needs to do there with him. I hope he's good. You never want to see a guy his career end shortly because of college football and things like that. So I hope it works out for him. But it's the Cardinals at the end of the day, man. The Cardinals don't move me, and I'm not trying to be condescending, but they just don't do it for me.
Are you surprised that the 49ers haven't tried? Well, I guess they did try and trade up for Michael Williams. Do you think that they will stay where they are because they don't have a pick now in the rest of the second round? Or do you think that they're going to try and package some picks and make a move back up here?
I mean, it just depends on who's there, who's available and how the draft is falling, right? Because right now, what pick are we on? 46, 47?
48.
48. So they pick they got 26, 27 picks till they pick.
Right.
I mean, I guess you could, but I think they need as many bites in the apple as possible, right? So maybe try to stay where you are at 75 and 100, or maybe use 75 and 138 to move up into the 60s, right? Maybe you do that so you still get 2 picks in the third round. But I don't think they're going to get too crazy here, man. I think this draft's going to follow them well because of the depth there. You still got some decent wide receivers in this draft. The linebacker class is a little shaky, but there's some potential there. They can probably get somebody that falls to them. I wouldn't be surprised they make maybe 1 trade, but I wouldn't be surprised they make 0.
The guy at linebacker that I keep hearing about is Demetrius Knight from South Carolina, and everybody just says he's basically a crazy person, that he'll just launch himself at guys like a missile. And I do think that defense doesn't really have that attitude. Like Fred has that attitude, but Fred Warner, I love him He's not a big hitter. Like, that's not his. He gets dragged sometimes when he tries to bring some of these ball carriers down because he's not the biggest guy in the world. Dre Greenlaw was the muscle of the defense.
Yeah.
He hit you and you would stop moving. They don't have a guy like that. Everybody says Demetrius Knight out of South Carolina is a guy like that. Dane Brugler has him going in the 3rd or 4th round. That's definitely something. I don't know anything about him, but I am for that attitude coming back to the Niners D.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They need to bring the, like, I love Fred. Fred is not the muscle of this team. It was Dre, and you saw that. Can you get a guy like him, Darius Knight or Demetrius Knight from South Carolina? I like the kid from Georgia. I was hoping for Carson Schwarzenegger to kind of fall. Maybe that would be a really sweet peak to get him there. Jeffrey Bassa from Oregon, I think he fits the mold. I don't know about the kid Kane from UCLA. He feels more like a special teamer. Some of these bigger safeties in this class to maybe be able to transition, that might be a possibility at linebacker. They just need to get the right mentality, that all gas, no brakes mentality back in the defense. There's some kids in this class that are like that, but my worry, and just something that I kind of personally thought privately, some of these kids have gotten paid in the NIL level or in college with the NIL. They're, maybe they're not as committed or dedicated to football and chasing that big contract or chasing just whatever it is, loving football the way they used to. I kind of thought that a little bit ago. Somebody tweeted about that the other day, that these teams had those questions. But I think that's something that's really going to be a concern going forward with some of these, later on guys who've been paid at the NIL, with NCAA, with the NIL stuff. So we'll see how it goes.
I heard that John Lynch said, actually, one of the kind of positives about the whole NIL thing is NFL teams get a chance to see how guys handle money, right? Because now all of a sudden, significant amounts of money, and what do you do and how do you respond, which is something that, there's no way for any of these NFL teams to know that previously. That's kind of an interesting thing that I hadn't really thought of before. Like, that is sort of one of the positives, is like, that is a little piece of information that you don't necessarily have, that you never had before. Yeah.
No, that's a fair point, right? Because some of these, like, who was Derek Harmon? He talked about how he spent his NIL money to take care of his mom. Like, why wouldn't you take that guy? Like, his, rest in peace to his mother. Apparently she passed away this morning.
Yeah.
That's so sad. But the fact that, he's playing football for, that's his why, right? I work in sales, and I talk to a lot of the guys, what's your why? Like, me personally, the why stuff for me is my family, my kids, and things like that. These football players, they have their why. Some of them are selfish reasons. Some of them are family reasons. Some of them are trying to get their families out of poverty. Some of them are trying to take care of a loved one, like Derek Harmon. Like, seeing how these players act with money, that's a big deal, especially with, you're 20 years old. You just signed a $45 million contract and you get $20 million right away. How do you respond? Sometimes people are like, you can't tell me nothing, or it's just another day, right? I'm going to go back to work and keep grinding for the next one. So that's a really strong, good point by John Lynch. The other thing with the NIL is keeping these kids in the college a little bit longer, right? So they can develop. I know the past couple of drafts, people were like, these kids aren't developing, they're coming out too soon, and then they're just washing out faster in the NFL. Prior to, I don't know when it happened, but let's just say prior to 2011, right? These guys are staying maybe 3-4 years in college and coming out a little bit more developed. Same thing with the quarterbacks, right? These college quarterbacks, was it Bill Parcells who had a Rule 4-year starter, certain amount of games, right? That may be something that's going to lend to these quarterbacks coming out a little more prepared, right? Like, perfect example, next year, Drew Aller, he decided to stay one more year at Penn State, right? He could use another year in college before he gets to the NFL, right? That stuff is valuable, and he's getting big NIL money. The kid from Georgia, Carson Beck, he just got paid by Miami. Now, I don't think he's very good, but the point is he's staying because, one, he knows he wasn't going to get drafted early this year's draft, but also he could probably use a little bit more refinement in the college game to get him better for the next level. So I'm in on the NIL. It just needs to be kind of honed in, a little more restrictive. Like, hey, let's kind of get this thing to where it makes sense for all these college teams to kind of have more of a level playing field.
Things are starting to pop up on Twitter about Alfred Collins. I'm seeing this from Jeff Muller, who says Alfred Collins' comp on NFL is Javon Kinlaw. Collins notably slid in the draft due to medical concerns, primarily a calf injury and a foot injury that landed him in a boot since his pro day.
That's interesting.
Don't love that. I mean, Javon Kinlaw, the whole thing with him was that his knee was screwed up from jump, and it was arthritic and deteriorating, and it flared up immediately for the 49ers. And now, if Alfred Collins has an injury issue, they better be damn sure that it's nothing serious, because they, like we talked about, they need to hit on these picks. This is your second pick. You better be really damn sure about the medicals.
Yeah, they have to be, obviously, right? But he played a full season. What landed him on? What got him hurt after his pro day? Like,
The calf strain, apparently. I'm checking the Dane Brugler draft guide.
that doesn't make sense because he played all 16 games in Texas last year.
He missed part of the draft process because of a left calf strain.
Was it from the bowl game? Maybe. That could be something late in the season. I mean, he did. That's different, right? He's going. The college football playoff is the first time this year, right, where they added 2 extra games. So that could be something that that's probably what it is, conditioning and stuff like that. You're adding 2 extra games, high leverage games as well. You're not playing just a regular SEC game. You're playing for a national title. So that's probably what that is. I'm going to lean it's probably nothing, but we'll see.
Nothing. Yeah, obviously, hopefully nothing super serious. Seeing James Foster posted on X, there's no such thing as a can't miss prospect, but it's really hard to imagine a team drafting Alfred Collins and their run defense not immediately improving. Dude sheds blocks like he's pulling weeds in the yard. Look, like I said, tonight I want to be happy. I like seeing all this film. I like seeing the Niners have picked, shove guys out of the way. I want to believe, damn it. Whether the Niners are going to be good or bad for the next 3 to 5 years is determined by what happens tonight and tomorrow. Like, that is just a simple fact of the matter. You screw up the draft, you stink. You hit the draft, and you can all of a sudden accelerate and be really good for a long time, man. So this stuff is important. And tonight, I want to believe that the Niners are on their road back. So I'm loving this film.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, again, like I said, this is how they've won in the past. You build your trenches. Obviously, the 49ers inherited DeForest Buckner and Eric Armstead, two, in my opinion, at the time. Well, Buckner was probably top 5 defensive tackle, and Armstead was probably top 10, top 11 at the time. You get that back in the Niners defense with a more refined Nick Bosa, and you have a guy like Mike Williams on the other side. You're building for the future, obviously, because you have to pay Brock Purdy, and you have an offense that's a little expensive with Ayuk and Kittle if you're going to repay him. Trent Williams towards the end of his career. But I think they hit on Pooney, and maybe they'll pay him long-term down the road. This is why the Eagles are so successful. They have an expensive offense, but a cheap defense. But that cheap defense is drafted, and they're making it, to where it's going to rotate, right? They're going to have to start drafting for offense and paying the defense. They're gonna balance it that way, as long as Jalen Hurts is the guy that continues to, be what he's been the last couple of years.
The Demetrius Knight dream is dead, Javi. Cincinnati has taken him with the 49th overall pick, number 17 in round 2. Cincinnati's going defense, man. But that is unfortunately one dream dead for the 49ers. So I have to find it somewhere else, unfortunately. I'm trying to think. Who did Cincinnati take in round 1? They took Shamar Stewart. That's right.
Yeah.
So damn, man, they're going for ability, the traits in round 1, and God knows their defense. I mean, holy hell. Joe Burrow was incredible. Their defense was trash last year.
Yeah, Joe Burrow could score 50 points, but if the defense gives him 51, it doesn't even matter. So
they absolutely had to do it. Valerie says Alfred Collins only missed 1 game during his time at UT. He's durable. The Niners generally, starting with last year, seem to sort of shift their draft philosophy to experienced guys, durable guys, and it worked out well for them. So hopefully they're sticking with that philosophy. I talked with Dieter Kurtenbach this week, Javi, and he told me that the Niners have sort of overhauled how they did the draft. It used to be consensus for the first round pick. John Lynch gets to pick the guy in the second. Kyle gets to pick the guy in the third. Last year, they kind of said, screw that. They're going with consensus on all the picks, and they had their best draft in years.
Yeah, go figure. Why would you let Kyle Shanahan, listen, I know back in the day that, if you're going to be you're the cook, let you buy the groceries. Sometimes it's best. You shouldn't go to the grocery store hungry, right? Like Kyle Shanahan was going to the grocery store hungry with some of these selections, Dante Pettis, Joe Williams. Like, what are we doing, dude?
CJ Beathard,
Trey Sermon, TJ, TDJ. Like, what are we doing? Like, let your scouts do their job. Allow them to do their job and get you the players that you've been looking for. You clearly went consensus last year. You had a more successful draft with that kind of philosophy of, let's get everyone to agree in the room. Obviously, you can have good discussion on why you don't think this player should be picked here. But at the end of the day, if you could have a fair enough argument where it makes sense, you're basically closing, the guys around you. Hey, this is why this is going to work. This is why this is going to work. This is why this is not going to work. That's how successful teams operate, right? This is why I like what the Eagles have done so far. This is why Howie Roseman has been one of the better GMs in football. He from what I understand, it's scouts and coaches. Scouts kind of supersede a little bit here in their draft room. And obviously they've been successful at it ever since they let Chip Kelly walk out of the door, right? So that's kind of the way you want to do this. The Ravens have a simple philosophy. Hey, we're taking best player available. We don't care if we need the player or not. We're just going to take good players from good schools, right? Everyone overthinks it. Take good players from good schools with limited injury history. You're going to be all right.
More often than not, right? Yeah, like not every pick is going to work out, but you're going to hit on way more than you know. And that's sort of the name of the game. Peter Schrager had a tweet. Let me throw that up. He says, 49ers used to look at the defensive line as their strength, Buckner, Armstead, Bosa. Williams and Collins are a sign that they're looking to return to those days. Two strong selections out of the gate. Kasarik and Robert Saleh are happy men. I'm amazed at how much Kasarik and Robert Saleh are getting mentioned and talked about and praised. For everybody that says Kyle Shanahan's a control freak and all this stuff, it sure seems like the two defensive guys are getting all the praise and credit for these two picks. So I don't know if Kyle got his power taken away or if he's evolving, but it seems like, he's not the driving force behind these.
Yeah. I mean, I think it also, I think I'm going to shoot Kyle some bail, right? Like Kyle's also stated before, like if he's going to take, he'd rather take a defensive lineman over an offensive player. Like he's stated that. So he knows that that's how you win in the trenches. So the solid thing, maybe they're trying to push a different narrative. Maybe they're trying to set something up later on down the road if the Niners were to falter. Oh, this was a solid draft and Kyle wasn't that much influence and we can kind of move on from this guy. But I think at the end of the day, the Niners have plenty of offensive weapons. You still have Christian McCaffrey. You have George Kittle. You have Ricky Pearsall. You have Juwan Jennings. You have Trent Williams. You have Dominic Pooney. You have Kyle Juszczyk. Regardless how you feel, Rob, they have an offense that should be able to score points, right? So, and where your issues are. When where your problems are, you have to fix them. So they knew going into last season that their defense was going to be shaky. They said it. They acknowledged it. And then this year they had to do what they had to do. So allowing Robert Saleh and Kasarik to essentially pick the groceries, right, for lack of a better term, then let's do it. But I don't know that Kyle's giving up too much power because I know Kyle's philosophy is also defensive minded. He can make a lot of things work on offense. I mean, for crying out loud, Nick Mullins was throwing for 3,500 yards, and Richie James had like a 189-yard game. Like Kyle can make the offense work with pretty much anybody that can get open and a guy who can throw on time. So Kyle can kind of get his toys a little later. The defense a little more where you need to hit on these picks. You need to, you need to replenish that. You need to restock that inventory on the defensive line, which we know has been their bread and butter the last 5-6 years. They have to do it. They had no choice. I mean, we saw it all last year. You're getting run on by Green Bay. You're getting run on by the Bills. You're getting run on by everybody every week. It was over 100 yards religiously. It was just a bad defensive line. Obviously, the defensive coordinator was over his head, but you have to get back to what your core values were, and that's stopping the run and getting after the passer on third down. So I like what they're doing. They're going to be just fine. I think with a light schedule this coming season, I say that with an asterisk because you never know how some teams may shake out in this draft and what they how they go into training camp, vibes are right, and things like that. But based on their schedule, this team should still be able to win 9, 10, 11 games and be competing in the playoffs. I'm not saying a Super Bowl. I'm saying playoffs. So that's kind of my expectation going into this year.
You mentioned Nick Sorensen. Can you imagine Jed York putting out a tweet? Here we go, Nick Sorensen in the building, #trenches, like how far we've come when it comes to 49ers defensive coordinator. Even Steve Wilkes, like that was never going to be a thing. Clearly, it is with Robert Saleh. The Niners fundamentally were built to get a lead up on you, and then when the other team was playing from behind, they were going to get pressure with their front four, and their secondary was going to be able to eat as you were trying to pass to come back in the game. Last season, that completely fell apart because the Niners offense could get a lead some of the time, but the defense couldn't stop the run, and they could never hold anybody, and just the whole thing collapsed in on itself. And I think they're trying to get back to that because I agree. Kyle is like, I'll figure it out on offense. We still got multiple all-pro players. We're going to be good enough. The question is going to be whether or not the defense can get its head out of its ass, quite frankly. And they're trying to do that with 2 picks on the D-line.
Yeah, absolutely. Last year was so frustrating just watching so many games just get away from them over. It was the same. It was the same shit every week. Can't stop the run on third down. Can't get off the field on third down. You're getting up big explosive plays on first down in the run game. The secondary was fine, but the front seven was so bad. Nick Bosa's out there fighting for his life, trying to stop the run while Malik Collins is just letting people run right by him. And who's the other guy? Jordan Elliott, not our Jordan Elliott, but the Jordan Elliott and I've been listening to you guys for a while, but I remember Vish saying something early on. He's like, he tried to sell us on Malik Collins and Jordan Elliott. Like, what?
Yeah.
Jordan Elliott was a cuttable player, and Malik Collins was about to get cut before they traded for him. So it was a disaster last year. So
not good on multiple levels. A couple of picks obviously have been made. We mentioned Will Johnson. The Rams got a tight end in Terrence Ferguson from Oregon. Ariante Essery went to the Houston Texans. Demetrius Knight we talked about. The Seahawks took a tight end, Elijah Arroyo from Miami. A lot of people liked him.
Surprising.
The Panthers went with the other Texas A&M defensive lineman, and the Houston. I always do that. The Tennessee Titans went with Femi Oladejo, who a lot of people wanted to see in San Francisco. One of those kind of crazy type people. He is now off the board as well.
That's early. That's really early. I thought Oladejo was going to go closer to 100, to be honest with you. That's really early. But hey, if you like a player and you have conviction, you take him. So that's really surprising. That's kind of early, I thought. But hey, I'm just a guy on Twitter, so I don't know.
Convicted.
I got him ready to go, and now I got these too, Javi.
Consensus.
Convicted and consensus. I got 2 of John Lynch's favorite words.
John is a content machine. He should be a content creator, to be honest with you.
Think of the
he
content.
He gives us a lot of good material. Scratching in the face. He does the head thing.
Yep.
So yeah, I love John. For all the shit I give him, I love John. John's a good guy.
Oh, I think he's a good guy, and I think he is good at what the Niners need him to be good at. He's good at shaking hands and kissing babies, the things that Kyle hates doing. John is out there doing those things. Sometimes I do think he gives away a little too much. Like you always get like 10 to 15 seconds of complete pure truth from John Lynch. And sometimes I think that gets him into a little trouble. But I did not have a lot of confidence in him when he was initially hired. I'll never forget it. I was at the Super Bowl. I was actually eating dinner with Mike Florio. And all of a sudden he got a text and he looked at his phone and he was like, "Oh, you're going to be mad." And I was like, "What happened?" He's like, "The Niners are hiring John Lynch." I'm like, "The Fox broadcaster, John Lynch?" He's like, "Yep." I was like, "What the hell are we doing?" And I was wrong. He's good at what they need him to do.
That was such a surprise when they did that. I was like, the safety from Denver? But I mean, it's so far so good. I don't have many complaints with John. I think we know who's in charge. I think we know who does the contracts, but I wish John, I don't know, I guess maybe I wish John had a little bit more control on some things and maybe a little less control in other ways. But John's never seen a microphone he doesn't like. So I'll tell you that much.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. I 100% agree with you. And he's also good at apparently kind of smoothing things out. Did you read the Mike Silver book, The Why Is Everything?
There's a lot of good nuggets in there. Kyle and Robert Saleh getting heated, and John kind of being the soft landing guy. Hey, let's get this here and let's mediate this stuff. So yeah, that's John. John seems like that kind of guy, unless you piss him off, apparently.
Kyle MF's people, and then John smooths it all out pretty much. Speaking of ticking people off, Levin Black is here. Hi, Levin.
Oh shit.
Yeah, Rob guilt tripped me into showing up.
Yeah, I sent him a text. He said he was going to come on board, and then we're an hour into this thing, and Levin Black is a ghost. So I fired up. A text.
Just finished bedtime, and I worked 12 hours today. So
That's true.
I will not finish that sentence, so you don't have to do extra work.
There you go. Frisbee Life says, is Levin conscious? Diego Figueroa says, Levin, now this is must watch. Well, Diego's just flat out lying. We've been talking about it a lot, Levin. Niners go defensive tackle with their second pick, Alfred Collins, who is a huge friggin' guy.
Yeah, I think this is their overall draft. If you want to sum up what they wanted to target early on, I think their philosophy was, let's let Nick Bosa do what he does best. They're wanting to get another edge defender so that people can't double team Bosa nearly as easily. And they want to get a guy on the inside that can play either position, that can move around, that can occupy a defender at the very least, so that Nick Bosa can go horizontal, can move around, go where he needs to make the big splash play. Let your defensive player of the year have the freedom to make the most of every single play.
I wonder if Bosa went to them too and was like, can you get me some help for the love of God? Because I do feel like you could see at times he was trying to do a little too much because he knew that if he didn't, they had no chance. And he's not a rookie anymore. I wonder if he went to them and was like, you know how to do it right. We got to get back to that. I can't have another year like last year, because Bosa's getting crapped on too, by the way. And I'm sure he doesn't love that, Javi.
No, yeah, I mean, listen, I like Bosa. Do I think he's the best defensive end in the league? No, but he's a top 5 guy, when healthy. But you got to give him a little bit of help. No pass rush in the league is doing it without somebody decent, at least a defensive tackle. Like, Jesus, right? The Rams got it done with Jared Verse and Jared Fisk, right? They're making it work with 2 young players. Myles Garrett, yes, while a physical freak, he's got 2 defensive tackles that can move off the defensive line. The Eagles, they're doing a little bit backwards, right? They got the 2 guys up the middle, and they got some lighter guys on the edge that are. You need a Batman and a Robin, right? You need these players to assist you, right? When the Niners were at their best in 2019, which was an enrichment of a spoil of riches with Armstead, Buckner, Bosa, and Ford, and then you had a really strong wave of second tiered guys to go there. That's how you win, and the Niners didn't have that last year. And kind of truth be told, they didn't really have it in 23 when they went to the Super Bowl either, right? They were still kind of lacking. There was something lacking with that defensive line in 2023 when they went to the Super Bowl. So to kind of rebuild that 2019 defense, this is the model. You need to provide some help for your all-pro, potential Hall of Famer defensive end with blue chip players in the middle and on the other side to alleviate some of those double teams that he's seeing. Now we can get back to those stunts that we were seeing with Bosa a couple of years ago, where he's just kind of looping around when they had those turbo packages. I remember at one point they had a Menahue, Ibuka, and Bosa on one side, and you didn't know where the hell the pass rush was coming from, and they were getting home quickly. I remember that Detroit game, week 1 a couple of years ago. I was like, what? Wait, why is Bosa all the way out here and this humongous space in the middle, and the 3 guys will collapse, and here comes Bosa wrapping around. And I'm like, what the hell is that? So let's get back to some of that creative pass rush stuff where you can free up Bosa somehow. I'm with it, man. I'm excited. So this is good.
I was intrigued when Fred Warner spoke to the media at the first day of the Niners offseason program, and he talked about Saleh addressing the team, and he said, Robert's here, and he's still all gas, no brakes, but his scheme has evolved a little bit. They're going to do some more complicated stuff. We needed that. I mean, Kyle basically told everybody that Nick Sorensen could not adjust, couldn't adapt to what, the injuries and the adjustments by the other offense, and it was just a disaster. So I want to see more of everything you described, quite frankly, because as I said yesterday, they need the help. Nick Bosa has more sacks and quarterback hits than the other 11 defensive linemen on the roster combined, and Bosa didn't even have any sacks in 2020 because he was hurt all year long. So that's the sorry state of the defensive line before this draft. They get the 2 defensive linemen 11. we've been talking about it. What do you want them to do now? Because I feel like you've done your homework a little bit, right? You've taken 2 defensive linemen. Are you okay if they go to a skill player in round 3? Do you want them to go offensive line? What are you hoping for?
I'm hoping they go best player available. I told you the other day that you get outside the top 2 rounds. Like I think in the first, second round, you adjust a little bit for need. You still mainly go best player available, but you have needs where you kind of need a starter. So if you can get a starter at a position of need, it makes more sense than getting a guy who could start, but is going to be a backup for you at a different position. You get to the 3rd round, it's best player available pretty much all day. Now, if there is adjustments made, it's when, well, we think both these guys are pretty much equal. Then you pick, a linebacker, or you pick a corner, or you pick an offensive tackle. But outside of that, like I don't care what position it is. If that's the best player that you think is clearly above anybody at a position of need, you go with that player.
That's exactly what Javi said. Best player available. Just take good players.
He's a smart guy, Rob.
I know.
Sometimes. The Packers just took Anthony Belton. That was a guy I thought the Niners could potentially get at 75. Clearly, he's a scheme fit. Packers took him. So, I was right on that one. But as far as the scheme, I thought he'd be great. NC State runs a lot of outside zone. He was perfect fit for the Niners if they were going to take him there or move up. This is kind of where this might be the sweet spot, though, Rob, where they trade up. We can get to the 58 to 62 range, kind of see if you can sneak a player in there. I'm trying to see who's available. Best available guys. You got Mike Green, you got Darius Alexander, Trey Amos, Jared Wilson out of Georgia, the center. He has multiple positional versatility on the offensive line. Does Kyle get his toy and Jalen Noel from Iowa State? John Lynch did hint that Brock Purdy is like favorable to Iowa State guys. Go figure. But Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins are some 2 really good wide receivers. Jack Beck is available. Landon Jackson, I'm not really a big fan of his, but would they do that? Thomas, the corner out of Florida State. Trey Amos, I think he already, Trey Amos is still available at corner. Do they go corner, move Lenore permanently to the nickel, and you have Ronaldo Green, Trey Amos, and Lenore? There's a lot of ways they can go here at 75, but I kind of think they should trade up here. I think they should get into the 60s if they can, to try to get one of these guys and still keep 100. If they can do like 75 and 138 and maybe one of their 7s to get back in, into the early part of round 3, I'd be all for it if they can do that, man. I kind of hope they do, because there's a lot of really good players that I think would be ideal for the Niners here. Even Josiah Stewart, maybe you take him at 75, the edge player out of Michigan. Again, big school, limited injury history, played on the defensive line with Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham. I'm looking at, blue chip players from blue chip schools right now, and that's what they need. And that's when they've been most successful, right? Their best draft, BYU be what it is. You took Brett Warner. That's a good school. Nick Bosa, Ohio State. You took Deebo Samuel, South Carolina. Dre Greenlaw came out of Arkansas, right? That 2019 draft was so solid from blue chip players from blue chip schools. That's what you need to be doing, especially now with the way the NCAA is all set up with these, mega conferences. So I kind of hope they kind of trade up here. I think they need to get back into the 60s to make something happen.